So as you can see, this is the back part of the nappy. And essentially with your pocket, if you want to do like an easy pocket modification yourself, all you really need to do is actually cut out a little bit of paper, probably about, I don't know, about ½ inch like high, and then tape it to the back of your pattern. And what you really want it to do is just be a little bit wider than those elastic points. So your next step is to cut out your inner layer. I always trace my stitch line on, and then I just do a pretty rough cut around it. It's important to note that when you do trace your line on, you actually want to stop the stitch line just where the pocket flap sort of begins. So I like to go ahead and actually poke all of the caps through the fabric when it comes to snapping. I just find that it makes life a little bit easier. It just makes the whole process a lot faster. Now we're going to get onto stitching the layers together. Alright, so I've gone ahead and clipped the 2 layers together, and what we're going to do next is start sewing. So we're actually going to start sewing at one of the points here on the stitch line, so just outside of the pocket. Follow it all the way around, and then obviously stop on the other side. So now that we've got our layers stitched together, what we're going to do is just cut the pocket flap down a little bit more. It's really important that you don't actually go right down to the stitch line, and you'll find out why when we turn out to top stitch. But you want to keep 2 or 3 millimeters sort of clear of that stitch line. So do that on both sides. So once you've cut that little line, you want to fold the flap over. So I actually do mine twice, I think it looks a bit neater. In general, nappy fabrics don't really fray. So if you are doing a pocket, say, without leaving the flap, so you're kind of doing it within the seam allowance, you can actually just fold it over once and then just stitch along. But I like to do mine twice just to make it a bit neater. And as you can see, when you do fold it over, you're going to have a little bit of overhang on the other side, and that's fine. It's just because we didn't cut all the way down there. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and stitch this casing on the side that I've folded over and clipped. Now, it'd be probably pretty hard to do it without actually taking this part of your machine off, so highly recommend doing that if you can, because then we're going to pop the nappy opening in that little section there. Very hard to do one-handed, and then we're essentially going to stitch it like that just to create the casing. One thing to remember is you do want to keep about 3 or 4 millimeters clear of the end of the casing there. The reason why being that the elastic point starts back here a little bit more. And that is our first casing done. All right, now we've got our 2 casings done. What we're going to do is thread the elastic through the casing. So I kind of just do it by feel. I think that if you use the suggested amount in the one size fits most, if you're going to put elastic in both sides, it kind of ends up a little bit too tight just because it's essentially double the elastic, so double the strength. So I like to loosen it off a little bit and use a little bit less. What I do is I grab a bobby pin, like stab it through the end of the elastic, feed it through, tack down here, and then what I do is I just pull the elastic back the other way by feel, kind of so that it's I guess you'd want the elastic typically to be about half the length of the casing, but I make it just a little bit longer than that, so it's just got a little bit more softness to it, I guess. Yeah, and then once that's done, I just tack down the other end. All right, so I'm going to tack down one end of the elastic now. I've got it on just a very short straight stitch. I just find that that's the best way to do it. As I said, I threaded the elastic through with a bobby pin, and then it's kind of just loose on the other end. So all I'm going to do now is just tack that down. That down there, just pulled the elastic through by feel, and now I'm going to go ahead and tack down the other end. And that's your casing done. So because I did the leading edge pocket, instead of leaving that flap free flowing like you could, I'm putting elastic in there. So I'm just repeating the exact same steps. So that is your pocket done. For now, what I'm going to do is go ahead and do all the rest of my elastics like normal. I sew mine in, so I'll mark out the elastic markings, sew them in, then I'll turn this nappy out the right way and I'll show you how to finish off the pocket. Don't mind the baby talking in the background, but I've gone ahead and turned this out. I obviously haven't clipped it up yet, ready for stitching together, but this is the little gap that I was talking about. So there's a gap from where the sewing of the layers together sort of starts and the casing ends. I just find that if you don't leave that gap, it makes it a lot harder to turn the pocket out neatly. So leaving that little flap of fabric like we did there and not cutting the pocket opening like right down to the stitch line means that when you actually go to sew it together, it's a really nice clean finish, and it doesn't, like, nothing looks out of the ordinary. The other thing that you're going to do, of course, is you're going to tack down the end here, but from the outside. So you're going to essentially stitch these two pocket layers shut, because if you don't stitch these together, it puts a lot of pressure on that stitching there, and I would be worried that it would come apart and the nappy would start falling apart essentially. So do another line of stitching through both the layers there. Get that nice and firm. So here we have the finished product. I have top stitched, I've gone ahead and put closing snaps on, and of course I've secured the ends of the pocket so that it's really nice and sturdy, and that's it. That's how you do your leading edge. All done, ready for stuffing and getting on your kid.